I know that Elavine is still with us, and I know that Olivia has been listening in on her phone and is now back in her full glory. But maybe, Olivia, if I can bring you into this conversation that we're having now, because I think it's fascinating in terms of what do the different players in this game actually want to get from it. And of course, if you look at, say, Australia, so a producer of a lot of these materials in terms of the raw materials, and the UK user of a lot of these materials, with going back to that diagram you had, there are some of those activities that can either go upstream or downstream. Olivia, from your perspective in that battery space, when people are having these discussions around who actually does the beneficiation, who's winning? Is it a case where actually that beneficiation should go towards the people who are producing those raw materials, such as Australia, or should the beneficiation go downstream towards the people who are building the cars, or whatever the case might be, such as the UK? What's your perspective, Olivia? And then I'm really keen to hear Elavine's perspective on this as well.
So I think it can be a win-win here, because, say, if we did open up more facilities to refine the materials in Australia, then that is opening up a whole new market and many more jobs. They have a lot of the raw materials there. Say, for instance, lithium, 60% was coming from Australia, but they're not processing them in Australia. So if they started doing that there, then that's opening up new jobs, new things there. And then as well, transporting them once they are into their refined state, which is a lot smaller, easier to transport, and then taking it to the end where it's ending up in the electric vehicles at the EV manufacturing facilities. That's then also a win for them, because they're just receiving them in their end state. And it's coming in a way that has been sustainably refined, processed, and that's all able to be tracked. It's not having been transported to a place where we've gone to an opaque part of the supply chain. So it's a win-win at both ends, I see, for both the miners and the end market users. But happy for that to be built on from others. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for that, Olivia. And I'm just I know that Elavine, she's got a couple of conversations going on in the background at the moment. So just sticking with yourself, Olivia, in terms of that transparency then, because of course, at the moment, there's a very good reason why China is sitting in the middle of this value chain. And that's in part because many decades ago, they put in place their mineral strategy, and they've done a very good job of executing on it. Also, as well, in terms of the innovation and the ability to process these materials or to do the different stages of beneficiation, a huge amount of work has gone into that. And of course, a lot of that IP, that intellectual property, resides within China. And I think anybody else, of course, would be protective of that as well. So in terms of making us perhaps, again, people outside of China feeling more comfortable with regards to materials that flow through that jurisdiction, would that enhance transparency so people can say, look, I understand how this is being produced, and I know that that production plant is adhering to environmental standards, etc., that would be the same anywhere else in the world. If that transparency was available to people, do you think that people outside of China would have more trust of what's going on inside China?
Yeah, but I think that creating the trust and transparency within inside China is going to be difficult. They've got different processes and ways of doing things that we don't fully understand. They are so developed, and we've got to take our hat up to them. They have done excellently well. They're ahead of the race for many reasons. And they've got so many people driving new innovations that we are way behind of. But to answer your question, what do you mean in transparency? So if they're still going to China, or if we're taking out and just going straight from Australia to, say, the end markets in Europe?
If it's still going to China, because let's face it, that's where the ability to undertake an awful lot of this processing resides. So what level of transparency would we need?
Yeah, what I would more suggest is that we do a lot of the processing more local to where the mines actually are, so it doesn't have to be transported to China. That would be my biggest suggestion. Cut out that middleman, so it can go straight from, say, from mined to being refined in a location nearby, and then straight to the end market where it's put in to the electric vehicle. Because when I showed that graph, there was those two blue spots, the refined intermediaries and the active materials. They aren't dependent on a certain location at the moment. We can decide where those locations are. At the moment, they are happening in China, but they can happen elsewhere. So I'm saying potentially we should build facilities that are outside of China.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Olivia. I know that we've got Elevine back with us at the moment. So talking about where that beneficiation, Elevine, should happen. And you talked about this in your talk in terms of being able to, again, bring it further upstream. So it is the people who are actually extracting that material from the ground, you know, that beneficiation being closer to what they're doing. And then as well, if it can't be done by one particular group of individuals, collaborating with others so that you've then got the scale to be able to create that particular infrastructure, for example, that you need. And so I'm assuming, therefore, from your perspective, we're going further upstream with regards to all of this, rather than saying, no, take all of our uncut and our rough gems. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Sarah. That's exactly what I hinted on earlier on. Let's take the technologies close to the source. We cut on other expenses and then let it go direct to the end users. Because if you look it's both artisan and small scale mining, and even large scale mining, where you have minerals exchanging a lot of hands, that's where there's a lot of potential, or there's lack of transparency, there's exploitation and all those things. So if we cut the chain, if we narrow down the chain, I think that is going to help solve a lot of problems.
Fantastic. And as well, I guess with that, if you're narrowing the chain down, then those people who are trading in an illegal manner, and so therefore buying the less processed material, actually they don't have a seat at the table, because what they would usually buy and sell to those people who's doing the beneficiation is no longer even an option, because you're doing that beneficiation in country.
Exactly. That's true.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes.
So what we're going to do just in the last couple of minutes is work our way around the group. And Namely, I'm going to start with you because you've been listening from start to finish. In 30 seconds, are there any key takeaways from what we've heard today that you think, that is different to what I was anticipating, or yes, that totally reconfirms what I'm looking for, and excellent, I just found another person who thinks the same way as I do?
Do you know what I found fascinating is the I think it was Andy who talked about the push to decrease demand at the end use stage. I thought that was brilliant. Like, just really something to think about, especially for us at the upstream end. Like, what does that mean for us? You know, that's huge. So really fascinating. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm still going to go away with the whole bus statistics, to be completely honest, and make sure that everyone starts talking about that at home. Brilliant. Thank you, Namely. Jeff, how about yourself? Any aha moments? And then we're going to go to Olivia.
Not so much aha moments, but more just it's so good to see that this topic is being discussed openly, and the impact and the necessity of trust throughout the supply chain, just as a core part. I think it's excellent to hear. So thanks to everyone who's taken part.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Great. Olivia, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Elevine.
Any aha moments, but also want to echo Jeff's mostly. It was really interesting to hear how these all weaved together. And I found it interesting that we were talking a lot about, you know, we came here today to talk about trust, but then it really came down to transparency. That was a common thread and buzzword to it. So, yeah, interesting. And thank you so much for the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Olivia. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, we're all inherently nosy, aren't we? So we want to know what's really going on, and then we can make our minds up as whether we trust what's actually happening out there. But Elevine, how about yourself? And then I'll bring in Ludovine for any final words and commentary.
Okay, thank you so much. For me, I also found this discussion quite interesting, and I was actually impressed to see how trust is applied at different levels and how it is also critical in the whole value chain. And I think my aha moment was Olivia's presentation. I have never thought of battery technology along the sides that she presented today. So it has given me a different view, and I really like the presentation and also the contributions of everyone. So this was a very good discussion. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Elavine. Fantastic. And finally, Ludovine, any final commentary for us?
No, I thought it was extremely interesting to be looking at this from the perspective of such different stakeholders. I think one of the complexities right now is that we are trying to shape a lot of policy, a lot of discourse, a lot of narratives very urgently, and dealing with an industry that itself is shifting constantly. So the best thing we can do is try and weave as many of those together. I do think that some of our narratives deserve some challenging. So I look forward to continuing those discussions.
Exactly. This is all about challenge and open dialogue and welcoming those different perspectives as well. So brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us here today. Absolutely fantastic. And a round of applause to all of our fabulous speakers and panelists that we've had with us on the first session that we have here today. For me personally, I think there was a huge amount of discussion yesterday around that transparency aspect, which has flowed through into today. One of the key messages for today, I think, has been being able to see different other people's perspectives and actually recognize the fact that they might be totally different to our own, and there may be tension with regards to all of that. Now, this afternoon, we then go into a session all by itself, which is going to kick off with how do you listen to one another? So we know that everybody else will have everybody will have a different perspective to us, but how do we begin to understand what that perspective really is? We've touched on some of those items earlier on today. So we're going to start off with how to listen. And then we're going to go into the world of tailings dams, which of course is one of those areas of high risk within the mining sector, because every year it seems we have a significant failure of one of the tailings facilities. So how on earth do we begin to create trust with regards to those pieces of infrastructure? We're then going to talk more about building consensus. We're going to listen to people who are experts in negotiation. And then finally, we're going to come through into that transparency aspect. So we've got Leanne Kemp, so the founder of Everledger, so one of the main companies that provides us with a tool through which we can do it. And then finally, in the last session of today, we're going to hear from John Crawley, who is going to share insights and stories from the Northern Ireland peace process. So not really anything to do with raw materials, but a lot to do with building trust.